I need a tea. I forgot my tea.
Better.
Let's start this video with something you probably don't wanna hear. Before you start, you need to know the ending. Any story starts with an idea. You ride a bus or take a shower and bam, you suddenly have the great idea. It might be a scene or a character that you think of. You feel the enthusiasm, it's gonna be great. It's gonna do this and then that happens, you start drawing and ta-da! Your very own manga is done. If only it was that easy. Creating a manga does involve a lot of steps, and depending on the project, it might take a long while before you can actually start drawing the pages. So in this video I want to give you some tips on how to get started and how to plan your project in such a way that you can actually get done, because that's where most people fail. Step 1. Like I said before, most stories start with an idea. It can just pop up randomly while you watch a movie, for example.
Oh, this is awesome! I'm gonna create the same stuff with different characters.
No, not this way. Even though sometimes this is what some creators do. But sometimes I've thought while watching a movie,
these characters are stupid. Why do they act this way? I can do it better.
Anyways, it's never wrong to get inspired by movies or music and to interpret certain scenes in your own way. I'm sure lots of you already have plenty of good ideas. Cheers to that. If you don't, then I'm planning to make a video on how to get inspiration in near future. Hopefully. Whenever that may be. Always make sure to capture your ideas, no matter how random they are. Write them down in a notebook or maybe on your phone, because this one you mostly have on you. It's important to capture them because our brain is tricky and tends to forget things quickly. Just like our dreams, for example. Actually, the idea for my story Another Me came from a dream I had, and because I wrote down the idea straight away, I could capture it, otherwise I would have forgotten it. I think I went to sleep right after. Fun fact, Stephen King doesn't write down his ideas because apparently you never forget a good idea. Well, Stephen King, good for you that you remember everything. My memory isn't quite as good. Or do my ideas just suck? Step 2. Write the story. Ugh, do I have to? I know the story. Well, you don't have to, but you should. Writing down the story helps you filling the gaps and making sure that your story makes sense and is well-rounded. And you can already plan out the dialogue, which will make the drawing process so much easier. Also, know your ending. No matter if it's a short story or an epic adventure, you need to know how your story ends or at least have a rough idea. It's especially important if you write a long story. You don't need to know every little detail in between, and you don't need to write down the whole story. But knowing the ending will guide you throughout the creating process. This way you can always have a goal to work towards too. And you are making sure that your story makes sense by the end of it. You don't want to end up like lost. When you write, you can be as detailed as you like. You can start with a rough outline of the whole story and then write the chapters. Or you can start by writing things and scenes that you already thought of and then try to connect them later. You can even write it down similar to a screenplay. It's all up to you. When I write my story, I like to concentrate on the dialogue. And then I make notes on the camera angle or the facial expressions of the characters, where it's especially important that I create them in a certain way. You can even sketch out certain panels on the side already if you like. So do whatever works best for you. The most important thing is that you don't start drawing the chapter before you have planned it out. If you start drawing the story and then you notice a mistake, then you have a problem, my friend. Because redrawing a chapter is so much harder than rewriting it. So make sure everything is right before you start drawing. And there are some people who can plan out a whole complicated story in their head without having to write it down. And well, if you are one of those people, congratulations, you're a genius. The rest of us will have to stick to the old methods. Short stories are a little bit easier to plan, so if you know what's going to happen, then I guess it's okay to skip this step and go straight to step 3. Designs. The steps involve designing the visuals, the characters, and the world around them. How much you design depends strongly on the genre and the type of story you're going to create. If it's a slice of life piece, then it's okay to just design the characters, because the world the story takes place in is basically our world, so you don't have to design it. But if it's a fantasy story, for example, and takes place in a different world, then it's kind of important to know what this world is gonna look like. The architecture, the clothes, the food, and so on. Again, it's up to you how detailed you work on this. You can just do rough sketches, or you can create whole paintings. A helpful thing to do at this step is, for example, drawing your characters' different facial expressions, because this will make you familiar with the character and then it will be easier to draw them. And while you're at it, you might think of their characteristic traits as well. Use this time to get to know your characters and how they act and react. But don't spend too much time designing things. It's so frustrating when an artist just keeps posting character designs and character sheets and all kinds of backgrounds of their story, but the story actually never comes, and it's just sad, and I just want to read these comics. Anyways, sometimes the story actually starts with a character design. So this step can be the first one in your process. The steps I'm giving here are just a rough outline. You don't have to stick to any of those. They're just here to help you and give you a direction. Step 4. Storyboards. Name. This is my least favorite step because it takes me way too long. It involves planning and sketching out the manga pages. If you have read the manga Bakuman, this is what they call name or neimu in Japanese English. I call them storyboards, but I think it's a term usually used in cinematography. Whatever you call it, this is where you sketch out the panels and the bubbles of each page. You plan out what each page will look like, where the important panels are gonna be, and how the characters talk. It's also where you think about perspective and sound effects. Basically, it's drawing the pages before you actually draw them. This step is especially important if you have to stick to a certain amount of pages for each chapter. For example, if your story is gonna be printed in an anthology. You're kind of creating your own guidelines to stick to. So you don't have to think about organizing the panels and concentrate on the actual drawings instead. And again, I will be talking in more detail about storyboarding in a future video. Just make sure the panel order is clear so that they are read in the right order. Don't take it lightly, it might make a huge difference on how your story is perceived by the reader. My storyboards are a mess, because I'm lazy. I'm the only one who can read them basically. But for me personally, they are only guidelines to stick to, not the Bible. There are some artists whose storyboards are almost as detailed as their finished manga pages. So in the end, you decide how much work you want to put into it. After you're done with your storyboards, it's your chance to get some feedback. Ask a friend, or preferably someone who knows a lot about comics, for example an editor, to read your storyboards and give you feedback. Is everything clear enough? Is some dialogue maybe unnatural? Getting feedback is always a good idea, especially before you start drawing the pages. Step 5, you finally get to draw the pages! And believe me, having done all this previous work, it will be so much easier for you to draw the pages in the best possible way. All you have to do is just to take your storyboards and your designs and start working. And you don't have to stick to the storyboards 100%, you can change things, maybe the perspective or some dialogue, whatever benefits your story and will leave a stronger impact. You can draw the manga pages on A4, A3, B4, whatever format is best for you. Of course, you can also draw digitally. Use whichever tools work best for you. I like to use a blue pencil for the rough outlining and then use a mechanical pencil for all the details. The professional way, I think, is to add the speech bubbles later, as well as the sound words. But it's also okay to draw them here already, especially if you want the speech bubbles and the sound words to have a certain aesthetic. Step 6. My favorite, the inking. It's the most relaxing part. Oh, come on! The materials you can use are endless. Use a ruler for the panel borders and maybe a thick micron. Japanese artists managed to draw the borders with a quill and a ruler, but well... Just try it for yourself and see whether you have the nerves for it. My tip on the ruler is get an artist's ruler with an edge like this. So no matter what you use, you won't smear the ink, or not as badly. For the actual drawings you can use microns or quill. I personally like to use the quills because you can vary the thickness of the lines and you can just get the more dynamic results in general. But there are some amazing artists out there who can get incredible results with microns. Microns are definitely a bit easier to get used to, but it's just so much fun to use ink and a quill. But if you choose to work with a quill, make sure the paper is right, otherwise the tip of the quill might get caught in the paper and then the results will look messy. A little secret for you, you don't have to buy expensive manga paper if you work with a quill. There are some good, cheaper alternatives out there. I will put the link of the paper that I use in the description box below. Feel free to turn the paper to make the inking process easier for you. This way your lines will look cleaner. Also, lines of varying thickness will make your figures and backgrounds look more dynamic and alive. Also, depending on the style, you might add shadows by using just solid black or cross-hatching. For the backgrounds, I prefer to use microns because doing them with quills would be a big mess, even with the artist ruler. And I know it's probably just my skill and I should practice it, but ain't nobody got time for that. Step 7. Black and tones. I really don't like this one. I personally add the tones digitally, but there are still plenty of artists who add them traditionally. And it's probably more fun, but it's also so much more expensive. Before you scan the pages, make sure they are clean. It's advisable to erase pencil lines, but I don't do that because I'm lazy. This channel should be called Manga Making for Lazy People. It all depends on how you scan the pages anyways. If you want to know the technicalities about scanning your pages right to make sure the quality doesn't get lost, and also how to prepare them for a possible print, then leave a comment down below and then I will see whether I will make a future video on this topic. You can paint the black areas by hand or digitally. I usually do a combination of both. For example, I ink black hair by hand with a Fude pen, but any other, especially bigger black areas, I prefer to fill in digitally, as it saves me a lot of time. And then you use tones to add shadows and special effects. And again, I'm not gonna go into detail about this step here, because otherwise this video will be way too long. Step 5 to 7 can actually be all done digitally, but since I never draw or ink my manga pages digitally, I can't really give you any tips on that. Once I'm done with the tones, it's time for the last step. Step 8. Text. Here you add your dialogue and sound effects. You have to find a font that fits your story, and there are lots of different fonts out there, but the general rule of thumb, don't use Comic Sans. For the sound words, you can either type the text first and then edit it, or you can draw them. If you have a text over a non-white area or a varying area of black and white, you can either make it white, or the best way is to add an outline to the text, for example, black text with a white outline. This way you make sure that this text is readable. Once you're done, save the file. Well, you should actually have been doing this throughout the whole process. And now you're done! Now do it 31 more times and you have a chapter. I personally prefer to draw all the pages before I start inking them. This way, when I go back to the first page again, then I might be able to see some mistakes that I didn't see before. And now I can correct them. But of course you can draw your story page by page, so drawing it, inking it, scanning it and so on. And once this page is done, you go to the next one. This way you have a bit more variety in your process. It's all up to you. I will be talking about some of these steps more in detail in some upcoming videos, But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to write them down in the comment section below and I will make sure to answer them if I can. And that's it on my part. I hope this video was at least somewhat helpful. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter and Animex. I would also like it if you subscribe to my channel and press the notification button. And you can read my manga Another Me online in German or in English. All the links will be listed in the description box. Thank you for watching and I see you soon.